Nahum, the book of Nahum, is a prophet. And in chapter 1, he tells us, he declares Nineveh's fall. Nineveh, the city that Jonah reached, remember? And they came and they repented, but they didn't teach their children. And their children turned away and became more evil than they had been. So now we're on chapter 2, where Nahum describes Nineveh's fall. Now, I want you to remember that this is prophetic. He is describing a battle.
No.
With quite a bit of detail that hasn't happened yet.
It should be described.
When he describes it. So it's the first word is describes. Nahum describes Nineveh's fall. After the title on each of these, it says Nahum 3 chapters. The very next line says chapter 2. Nahum describes Nineveh's fall. So the first part of the fall is the invasion, verses 1 to 4. The invasion. An oracle concerning Nineveh, the book of the vision of Nahum of Elkosh, the scatterer has come up against you. Man the ramparts, watch the road, dress for battle, collect all your strength. For the Lord is restoring the majesty of Jacob as the majesty of Israel, for plunderers have plundered them and ruined their branches. The shield of his mighty men is red. His soldiers are clothed in scarlet. The chariots come with flashing metal on the day he musters them. The cypress spears are brandished. The chariots race madly through the streets. They rush to and fro through the squares. They gleam like torches. They dart like lightning. There's not a lot to learn from this. It's just the invasion of Nahum will come suddenly. It will come by an army that is powerful. Notice they have chariots. And it says Israel is being restored. Now, we don't know at this point if it's Israel that conquers Nineveh. I don't believe so. I believe it's someone else. Nineveh are the Assyrians, so it wasn't the Assyrians. But whatever it is, it's for the sake of what they have done to Israel. Because he says, the Lord is restoring the majesty of Jacob as the majesty of Israel, for plunderers have plundered them and ruined their branches, their ongoing lines. That's part of what Nineveh had done, as they had plundered Israel and others, and now God is judging them for it. So the next thing it describes is the battle, 5 through 7. He remembers his officers. They stumble as they go. They hasten to the wall. The siege tower is set up. The river gates are open. The palace melts away. Its mistress is stripped. She is carried off. Her slave girls lamenting, moaning like doves, and beating their breasts. Whether it's literal or what happens is even no one remains, even up to the king and his queen. They are completely defeated. For number 3, the victory. That's why we're going through chapter 2 so fast. It's really just this whole battle description. Nineveh, give you the words? The victory. The victory. Nineveh is like a pool whose waters run away. Halt, halt, they cry, but none turns back. Plunder the silver, plunder the gold. There is no end of the treasure or of the wealth of all precious things. Desolate, desolation and ruin. Hearts melt and knees tremble. Anguish is in all loins. All faces grow pale. There's no hope. There's nothing but plundering. Their things and their wealth are all being taken away, and they are in desolation. The humiliation of Nineveh. Finally, the humiliation. Where is the lion's den, the feeding place of the young lions, where the lion and lioness went, where his cubs were, with none to disturb? The lion tore enough for his cubs and strangled prey for his lionesses. He filled his caves with prey and his dens with torn flesh. Behold, I am against you, declares the Lord of hosts, and I will burn your chariots in smoke, and the sword shall devour your young lions. I will cut off your prey from the earth, and the voice of your messengers shall no longer be heard. This is a complete defeat to a nation, Nineveh, that had been very proud, called itself probably a lion, that had its way, that was king of all. I know we want to study all the Bible, but this is a difficult chapter to really study, to think is necessary. But I want to remind us of this. God let me read this verse first. Romans 12:19. Behold, never avenge yourselves, but leave it to the wrath of God. For it is written, vengeance is mine, I will repay, says the Lord. Don't take vengeance. Never feel you have to avenge yourself. You never do. Because God's got it covered. God's got it covered. Look at the judgment. Look at the vengeance he took on Nineveh. Complete and utter destruction, desolation, humiliation. You know, they had an opportunity to follow God and they refused to keep it going. They repented, but they didn't follow up the repentance with continued change. And God took vengeance. I think sometimes it's hard for us to trust God to take vengeance. We feel we have to take it in our own hand. Well, God says he'll cover it. Oh yeah, but he won't do it as much as I would. In fact, part of the reason God takes care of it is we go too far. We don't know how to stop. But here we see when the time comes, God knows how to take vengeance. Leave it to him. We find in Psalms that David often prays that God will take vengeance on his enemies. So I guess we can pray that if somebody is harming us. I said the word, God's got it covered. Don't take vengeance, God's got it covered. He says it, he means it. Vengeance is mine. I will avenge. What's he say? I will repay, says the Lord. We can trust him. So we're going to continue on to chapter 3. That's why I let you have 2 handouts today. Even I could finish that one. It was basically reading the chapter. So now we're looking at chapter 3. Because wouldn't you know, someone's going to say, why was God so hard on Nineveh? My mom used to tell us the stories that when David was little, he was David. In 1st grade, he decided he was Dave. There were 3 Daves in his class. David's in his classroom, and he agreed to just be Dave. And he announced it to us at the dinner table. And he's been Dave ever since. It's true. But when he was little and a brat, instead of big and whatever he is, us older kids would sometimes not like his behavior. And we may have had good cause. He was a little one. And we tell mom, you're letting him get away with stuff. David is being a mess. You got to handle him or whatever. And whatever, she never followed ours advice. She always watched for herself and decided what to do. But sometimes when he would be disciplined and then he'd be crying, we would come and say, oh, mom should have never done that. I don't remember doing it. I'm sure it was Karen, but you know, sometimes I can just see people hearing finally he gets Nineveh back and then they're like, ah, poor Nineveh. So here in this chapter, Nahum defends Nineveh's fall. First he just declared it, then he described it, now he's going to defend it. And we get some of the reasoning, and maybe you were sitting here going too, why, wow, that seems like awfully harsh. Well, let's look. Nahum defends Nineveh's fall. First off, we see because they have followed false gods. Because they have followed false gods. Woe to the bloody city, all full of lies and plunder, no end to the prey. The crack of the whip, the rumble of the wheel, galloping horse and bounding chariot, horsemen charging, flashing sword and glittering spear, hosts of slain, heaps of corpses, dead bodies without end. They stumble over the bodies, and all for the countless whorings of the prostitute, graceful and of deadly charms, who betrays nations with her whorings and peoples with her charms. Behold, I am against you, declares the Lord of hosts, and will lift up your skirts over your face, and I will make nations look at your nakedness and kingdoms at your shame. I will throw filth at you and treat you with contempt and make you a spectacle. And all who look at you will shrink from you and say, wasted is Nineveh. Who will grieve for her? Where shall I seek comforters for you? Again, this is continuing on this vengeance, but up in the beginning, he's talking about how they had treated people, how they had treated the people around them. Heaps of corpses, dead bodies without end, and they stumble over the bodies as they're going to get more. So they were they were not just wicked toward God, they were cruel. They were very cruel in their defeating, and it came back on them. The use of prostitute here and whorings, God is a jealous God. He is the only God. And when we don't follow him, it's compared when we have other gods instead of him. It's compared to going after a prostitute. Because they're false gods. They're not the ones, the covenant God, and the one we as believers and Israel had a covenant with, like a marriage covenant. So they broke their covenant by going to other, quote, husbands, other men, other leaders instead of the covenant God. And they've created false gods. And they will call it whoring after them because it's like a man going after someone other than his wife. I know it's hard to describe. You ought to try it with 8 to 12-year-olds. Not only have they followed false gods, they are helpless drunkards. They're helpless drunkards, according to Nahum. Are you better than Thebes, that sat by the Nile with water around her, her rampart a sea and water for her wall? Cush was her strength, Egypt too, and that without limit. Put and the Libyans were her helpers. Yet she became an exile. She went into captivity. Her infants were dashed in pieces at the head of every street, for her honored men lots were cast, and all her great men were bound in chains. You also will be drunken. You will go into hiding. You will seek a refuge from the enemy. They're comparing what was done, how Nineveh was to Thebes, and this is some historic information about the Theban army and how they looked to be helped by others, but they were not. I told you that if we weren't doing all the small books, I would not choose to do Nahum. It's a challenging book. They are like, okay, when the Bible calls people drunkards, it isn't always complaining about how they drink too much. It's talking about how drunkards go about and they don't know what they're doing, and they don't have any remorse because they don't know what they're doing, and they hurt themselves and they hurt others, and they're just clueless. And so sometimes it's not talking about literally drinking, although they're using the example or the illustration of how drunkards are to say how they're behaving or acting. And they are like figs that easily fall. Fall is your word. All your fortresses are like fig trees with first ripe figs. If shaken, they fall into the mouth of the eater. Behold, your troops are women in your midst. Well, that's a nice compliment. The gates of your land are wide open to your enemies. Fire has devoured your bars. Apparently, figs, when they're ripe, they easily fall off the tree. You know, I know the figs I've eaten, fig Newtons, they do really easily. You just pick them up and there it is. But apparently figs, sorry, couldn't help it, came to my mind. At least I didn't talk about the two Newton brothers, right? Isaac Newton and Fig Newton. But I did now, so anyway. But here he means is they're like ready. It's not even hard to defeat them because God has made them so weak. And all your fortresses are like fig trees. I mean, what you think's protecting you is just God. Now, this doesn't always sound that defensive of Nineveh's fall, but it's kind of more understanding of what Nineveh was like and how God was harvesting it. So they're also like a swarm of weak insects. I don't even want to encounter a swarm of weak insects. I don't really want to encounter any swarm of insects. Do you?
No.
Or weak, like weak. I don't even want to encounter any swarm of anything. No. Fish, maybe. On video. Draw water from the sea for the siege. Strengthen your forts. Go into the clay. Tread the mortar. Take hold of the brick mold. There will the fire devour you. The sword will cut you off. It will devour you like the locust. Multiply yourselves like locusts. Multiply like the locust. Multiply like the grasshopper. You increased your merchants more than the stars of the heavens. The locust spreads its wings and flies away. Your princes are like grasshoppers. Your scribes like clouds of locusts, settling on the fences in a day of cold. When the sun rises, they fly away. No one knows where they are. It sounds like their leaders were just leaving them. It says, your princes are like grasshoppers. He says they are like sheep with sleeping shepherds. Your shepherds are asleep, O king of Syria. Your nobles slumber. Your people are scattered on the mountains with none to gather them. You know what I'm seeing here, and I've read it several times and tried to find other ways to apply it. But what I'm seeing here, it's kind of a description, different ways of understanding people who walk around without the Lord. Does that ever occur to you as we're reading this? Yeah. Because they followed false gods, whatever those false gods are, themselves, their wealth, their reputation, their politics, whatever they've put as the thing they value the most. They're like helpless drunkards. They don't even know they're hurting themselves. They have no idea what they're doing. They're even harming others. One of the tragedies of a drunk driver, my sister-in-law, I have a new sister-in-law. She's been my sister-in-law almost a year. Married my brother Tim last year. Her name is Kim. On her graduation night, she was 18. A drunk driver mowed down her mother out of her hand. They were crossing a street, and this drunk driver who knew his brakes were bad and had already had one charge of drunk driving came on the street, and Kim's fiance was next to her, and he saw something coming in the corner of his eye, and he stepped up a step, reached back for Kim. She stepped up a step, reached back for her mother, and she was gone. They have no idea what they're doing. The tragedy is they ruin their lives now, but here they destroy a life because they have no idea what they're doing. And in walking in sin without any of God's presence, the world are harming people and themselves. They're the people they love the most. They don't have any idea, like drunkards. They're so easily defeated by anything that comes their way. Any trial, they have nowhere to turn. You ever watching a movie or series TV and you're like, why don't they pray? Or maybe you watch the ones where they do. They have nothing. They're like figs. Just anything tips them over. Like swarm of weak insects. Even if they're a group and they have a leader and they think they're following, they fail them. Because there's no care. And here, let's read this. We just read, sheep with sleeping shepherds. The lost are sheep with a cruel shepherd. You have a shepherd. Your loved ones, whether they know the Lord or not, they have a shepherd. They either have the good shepherd or they have Satan.
Yeah.
And he's not taking care of them. He's worse than a sleeping shepherd because he will not only not help them or protect them, he will harm them. And they are like those with a wound that will never heal. With a wound that will never heal. There is no easing your heart. Your wound is grievous. All who hear the news about you clap their hands over you. For upon whom has that not come? Your unceasing evil. So here he's referring to Nineveh's unceasing evil, and now other people are going to see them suffering and clap their hands. But the lost have a wound that will never heal, and that is unless the Lord intervenes, because they have the wound of sin. Evil comes back on those who do evil. Evil comes back on those who do evil. Especially those who do harm to Israel. Nation-wise, the Bible multiple times indicates how we treat Israel will come back on us. We don't have to figure out why God says that, or I thought Israel rejected him. Israel are God's people. In the end, many will come to him from the nation of Israel. But the point is, you don't go against Israel and think God isn't going to get you. And I'm telling you that we're coming into a season of the election and different reasons we choose who we choose. Israel is not a non-issue. Israel is important. Why? Because Israel matters to God. We studied this in Obadiah, where this is a verse from Obadiah. For the day of the Lord is near upon all nations. As you have done, it shall be done to you. And as you read the context, the Obadiah is specifically addressing people for how they have treated Israel. Your deeds shall return on your own head. We have nothing to lose by just staying allies of Israel. We don't have to say, well, I don't always like what Israel does. That's God and Israel have to work that out. Our issue is don't go against Israel. And so I encourage us with that. But when you think about this, and it is a very big description of how we've heard a lot about how evil Nineveh was. It was so evil, Jonah didn't even want to go there. He didn't even want God to save them. And then he did. God miraculously brought Jonah's very weak message, a very weak prophet. He would hardly tell it. He probably only used the exact words Jesus or God told him. They said, well, what do you mean? He probably just said, that's all I was told. I don't have to talk to you anymore. That's all I have to tell you. I got out of a whale to do this, so I'm just telling you. That's all I have to do. I'm not going further. And after Nineveh had this wonderful opportunity, they lost it. And I think sometimes of our nation, if you can find online about how the Christian roots of America, how much God was involved. There was a great revival in America right before the late 1700s. In the 1700s, a great preacher named George Whitefield. That man was an amazing preacher, and he had an amazing voice. Of course, they had no man-made magnification of a voice, like you couldn't, not magnification, there's another word, to make your voice louder. What? Like a microphone. Yeah, well, we use magnify for vision, there's another word, amplify, that's it. There had no means of amplification, but this man, George Whitefield, with the voice God gave him, in an outdoor setting where he was in a valley and speaking, spoke to 30,000 people with his own, just with his voice. But he had such a powerful message. Scholars or historians believe that George Whitefield was known by about 98% of all colonial Americans. Realize there's no television, there's no radio, just spoken word newspapers, but they took long. In fact, they believe 95% of all colonial Americans heard George Whitefield speak. And he was just preaching the gospel. Now, let me tell you something. That right after his revival is when the Constitution, the War of Independence happened. And many believe he was hugely influential because many of who would be our leaders became believers. And when you understand how our nation started, we have strayed far from it. And in the last even 2 years, we've turned back to believing what we started at. And we need to be praying that our nation embraces that, not just following whoever the current president is. That we would be able to see our Congress put things into law so that they last past a presidential executive order. They have to be put into law to last. And we should be praying because there's some wonderful things where our nation is showing signs of turning back. Charlie Kirk was doing that. He was bringing America, he was trying to bring the young people. They didn't even know their history. They didn't even know their Constitution. In fact, I think you can still do it on Charlie Kirk's old website, Turning Point, where his wife is now in charge, and you can get a copy of the Constitution. Because they know I just got one recently. They know so many Americans, all you have to do is read it, and you'll see. Which we're not following anymore. We need to turn back.
We're not teaching it in our schools.
We're not teaching it. That's why they're giving it out. You know what I'd like to see is some organization that can afford it and has the influence. Maybe Turning Point. Go around schools and put in there, "In God We Trust." You say, well, they won't let you. That is our national motto. It's already gone through the Supreme Court. In 1956, it went all the way to the Supreme Court to try to get it changed, so our national motto would not be "In God We Trust." They lost. Our national motto to this day, legally, is "In God We Trust." Do you think they're teaching that to our children? But it is our national motto, and they can't even challenge it anymore because it already is gone through the Supreme Court. We should be getting that out. Just put a big sign with a lot of red, white, and blue and a flag and say, America's national motto, "In God We Trust."
There's a movie out there with George Whitefield, The Great Awakening.
What?
There is a movie about George Whitefield and Benjamin Franklin,